Good evening, Congressman. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Good evening.
So, in Florida, there is this debate going on, and the president, of course, is calling for schools to reopen. Florida now is apparently in the midst of a rise in the coronavirus cases. How does this thing get resolved?
In Florida, we are going to reopen schools, but across our nation, there's never been a more important time for us to embrace parent empowerment. And of course, parents should be empowered with a in-person instruction option at public school with the sanitation and requisite social distancing and testing that is necessary to ensure that that in fact is a safe environment. But we should also do more to make sure that parents can keep more of their own money to raise and educate their own kids how they choose. Education should not be a government-run monopoly, and we should end the war that's gone on between public instruction and homeschooling for far too long.
Well, but how do we do it if someone is going to a public school and they're talking about either not opening the schools or they're talking about, what is it, blended courses? What does that mean? You go part-time and then other kids go the rest of the time? How does this impact kids in their learning?
We've seen a real impact to learning and learning gains as a consequence of coronavirus. Digital learning is not an end-all be-all, and when you don't have in-person instruction for some students, there really is an impact. So we've seen innovations like block scheduling, for example, used before, but in Florida, we're going to use sentinel testing and surveillance testing to make sure that we catch outbreaks sooner, and then we're going to improve the physical plant of schools so that we have more hand-washing stations and sanitation stations, because ultimately, we've got to protect not only the students, but we've got to protect the teachers and instructors as well. But the answer isn't just to wave the white flag of surrender. Instead, we should innovate. We should ensure that we've got more access to charter schools and private schools and even homeschooling. That'll take some of the pressure off of public schools and allow us to achieve our learning objectives.
What about the teachers? There's a resistance, obviously, from the teachers union, which has historically aligned itself with the Democrats. How is that going to impact this whole fight?
There may be some teachers that need the opportunity to retire early. Of course, we don't want people to make choices that they feel are unsafe, but I think with the right amount of testing on the front end, with the right amount of, I think, sanitation and social distance where applicable, we can keep teachers safe and we can ensure that students are not vectors for the disease. One thing we've learned during coronavirus is that young people who do not fear the disease are not going to comply with lockdowns and shelter-in-place orders, and so if they're going to be out and about, let's make sure they're learning and getting something as a value as a consequence.
You know, I believe it was Nancy Pelosi this week who said about the toppling of statues, she didn't take them that seriously. I don't know if we have any sound on that, but you're familiar with the statement she made, correct?
They're tearing down Lincoln, Winston Churchill, and Frederick Douglass. So this isn't about slavery or fascism or even race. There is an attempted cultural genocide going on in America right now, and it calls for patriots to stand up and say, this is a great country. It is worthy of our pride and our defense. The left wants us to be ashamed of America so that they can replace America. I love this country, and I think that we ought to do a lot more to push back against the hate that we're seeing.
Well, what can we do to push back? I mean, you know, you just saw in the what's posted there that there are statues that are toppled, there are statues that are spray painted red. I mean, it's like this thing happens in the middle of the night, and there's absolutely no discussion. These looters, these anarchists come out, and I believe that's a church right there. They just come out and decide they're going to destroy something. Where do they get the right? They don't have the right, obviously, but why do we stop this?
I am proud that President Trump has substantially increased enforcement and prosecutions. There are more than a half a dozen Antifa members from up in Portland that are going to be facing a federal judge, and I think prison time as a consequence of organizing these things. But the great irony, Judge Jeanne, is that the organizers of Black Lives Matter who pledge allegiance to the destruction of America have a lot more in common with the Confederate generals that they hate than they would like to admit, because it was in fact the Confederacy that initially wanted to kick out federal officials, who wanted to destroy America and change it to something different. I think think America was worth defending in the 1860s, and she's certainly worth defending today.
All right. Congressman Matt Gaetz, always good to have you on, Justice. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And up next, the president accusing Joe Biden of plagiarizing his economic plans. Daryl Issa is here to react live.